Hello, you're listening to the Ace Up Your Sleeve podcast. My name is Reichen Young, a student in the Acting Company for Excellence and host of the Ace Up Your Sleeve podcast. Today we are talking to Kaitlyn Barnard. Miss Kaitlyn is the Director of Education for NTPA. She has been with NTPA since 2017 and has directed and music directed many productions for the organization, including Into the Woods and Disenchanted. Prior to NTPA, Miss Kaitlyn taught music and choir in Plano ISD. Welcome, Miss Kaitlyn.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be a part of this.
Of course, it's an honor to have you on the podcast. All right, so first, how did you originally get involved in theater?
So I did some theater in school growing up, but mostly I was a choir kid. Obviously, that's what I went to school for. But my passion for performing as like an actress didn't really take off till I was in college. I was really lucky. I went to Texas Women's University to study music, and honestly, it wasn't my original plan to go there. So be open to what falls in your path.
Absolutely.
But I was really grateful that I ended up there because the size and the structure of the arts program there meant that I was able to study music education, but still perform in all their operas, be in their choir, be in all their theater productions, which is not the case at most universities. So it was a really great thing. I kind of unlocked my whole love of theater, and so then when I went on to teach in public school, I knew that I wanted to integrate theater into my curriculum. I taught at Shepherd Elementary, and so you're kind of the kids' first exposure to all arts when you're the music teacher.
Yes.
So I started doing like yearly shows, and actually some of the NTPA kids who were in my program there invited Mr. Mike to come see one of our shows. We did Aladdin Kids, and that's how I got the job. That's how I'm here today.
Wow, that's quite a story.
Yeah.
And so you're the Director of Education for NTPA. Tell us about the position and your plans for the future in that role.
So as the Director of Education, my biggest focus is obviously the Academy, but I also oversee the private lessons program. I actually left my job in public school to come here and start opening the Academy.
Well, thank you for the commitment. Right. We appreciate it.
So I've been here since day one of the Academy, and I really felt passionately enough about the Academy to come here because when I was a kid, if I had had the opportunity to be in that smaller school setting and do things I loved every day, it would have completely changed my life. So my goal for the future of the Academy is to create a safe and a loving environment where our students can like learn and grow and not only become the best performers that they can be, but also the best humans that they can be.
Wow, that's amazing. So I know music theater is your passion. How do you believe children will grow by participating in the arts?
So first and foremost, since like my very first time I wrote a cover letter for applying for a job and things, I've always said that I think arts is like our universal language. Everyone understands them, even if you don't understand the language or the culture or whatever. If you hear music or you watch a show, you can appreciate its beauty, and that just connects us as like a whole human race. So it really hit home for me, that lesson, when my high school choir was invited actually to perform at the Beijing Olympic Games.
Whoa.
A long time ago. And so part of what we did while we were there is we went and saw a Peking opera, which is like their version of opera in China.
Yeah.
And it was unlike anything I'd ever experienced before. Totally new vocal styles, totally new instruments. And it just kind of sparked my lifelong interest in world culture and travel and the arts. And I think that's part of why I'm the kind of teacher that I am today. So there's like something about the arts that just puts a drive and a passion and a care into people. And you really immerse yourself in the perspectives and the feelings and really understand others. And so I think if you're an artist in any way, shape, or form, whether you're a musician or an actor and actress or a visual artist, that you guys are the future. You're going to change the world one day.
No, and thank you for also like teaching us. I mean, you guys are the ones who are making us believe in ourselves so we can go on to future and all that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so you've clearly traveled the world and like had so much fun. So, Peking, did you say?
Yes.
So like, what were some of the techniques that you learned or that you saw that you really wanted to incorporate into like your style?
So one of the things that I really learned from that and from just being like an opera performer and things like that is that your voice, it's so important that you make yourself be able to blend and be flexible in all situations and in all styles. You know, we have a lot of kids who think like the only important thing is to be a belter, and that's just not true in the performance world. You can walk in with a whole book of belting songs to an audition, but if you don't know how to pull something else out and also be jazzy or also be pop or also be rock, you're not going to go very far. You have to be very open and really have command of your instrument.
And so were they like that in Peking?
Yeah,
like
so
very like open and expressive, or
So huge expression, and then on top
Ooh.
of that, it's also, well, at least when I went, I don't know how they're still doing it today, obviously, but when I went, it's all performed by men, and so the men are performing these female roles that are very much in their falsetto, and
Interesting.
their music, their tonality, you know, we like to keep like a center sound in Western culture, but over there it's very forward, very nasal, very sharp, and their instruments, you know, we have, you know, violins and cellos and
Yeah.
things like that. They have these instruments that are like slapping strings and like big drums and cymbals.
Wow.
It was just an entirely different world from what I had ever seen before.
Yeah, it seems like you're transported into just a whole new environment when you're over there.
Absolutely.
So I'm very glad that you said that, because I've always wanted to learn about that culture over there and like their different instruments and how they perform as well.
It's really, really a cool experience.
You studied opera when you were in college. What are the differences between opera and musical theater?
I love opera, and I'll talk about opera anytime anyone wants me to talk about opera. But honestly, musical theater and opera are kind of blending. There's some new operas that are coming out. I know I just was listening to one called The Listeners, which is very modernized. Like the main character is a daughter, and she's talking to her mother who had kind of like abandoned her and things like that, and talking about, did you even know I went through this? Did you? And it felt very musical theater, but it was the style of opera. And similarly, we have musicals that are coming out, like Light in the Piazza, that are very operatic in their ranges. So really we're finding some blending between the two styles, and I think that's really cool and interesting. But the biggest difference, I would say, is the use of recitative in opera. We have lines in musical theater that help carry us from scene to scene, song to song.
Yeah.
In opera, it's all sung. And so recitative is your lines, but you're still singing it the whole time. And so actually, recitative is some of the most difficult music in the show, because it's usually pretty unaccompanied and kind of all over the place, because you're telling the story and the dynamics of the character through these random jumping, leaping notes and rhythms.
Yes.
And it's really cool. But I think the thing that'll blow most of y'all's mind is opera does not use microphones.
No way.
Yeah, we don't use microphones at all. So when you go see an opera, they're not mic'd.
That's crazy.
Natural voice coming out. And so I always tell my kids when we're in Tech Week or something, I'm like, I have no sympathy for you if your microphone goes out. I've never got to have one, so you buck up. Let's go.
That's true. You gotta project.
Yes.
That's a huge thing in theater. And I mean, hey, if those people can sing so loud that people like, oh my god, and like who knows, like the 400th row can hear them, then they're doing a good job.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, architecture plays into that too. You don't perform opera in a space that doesn't have a good acoustics.
That's true. That's very true. It can also like resonate the voice and all that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So for musical theater, one thing that actors commonly do is they sometimes change it up. Like there'll be where, they walk in a different place, or they maybe sing something a little extra. Is opera confined to like a certain thing, or can they play around a little bit? Like,
so they definitely can play around, especially if you're doing pieces that are from the Baroque period. They have things that are called ornamentation. And so what will happen is that they'll sing the A section, and then they'll have a very different B section, but then it'll go back to the A section. So the first time you sing it, it might be Bel piacere, but then you come back to that and it's Bel piacere, and you can add your own little things into it. So that's very stylistically normal for Baroque pieces, but it also just kind of depends. Similarly to musical theater, when it's one of those tried and true songs, you just kind of don't mess with it.
Yeah.
You know, if you're doing Mozart, you kind of just do what Mozart said to do.
Exactly.
You know, because people a lot of times when they're coming to see an opera, they're coming to hear that one song that they know done that one way. But there is definitely more flexibility, especially with like newer operas or less known operas, and they kind of get to do their own thing a little bit more.
oh, interesting. Yeah, I know. Like for example, like kind of the musical theater version of that, like Les Mis. Like it's a little operatic, and it's kind of like that, and people never mess with it because either the singing is too hard, or it's just so set in people's minds that they know what it's like. And
Yeah, you don't add a riff to Eponine.
no. You directed many productions during your time at NTPA. Do you have a favorite show? And if so, what was it about the production that made it so special?
Man, I've been here for so long and I've directed so many, and there's things I loved about each of them. My favorite shows tend to be the ones where those kids are there to create a safe and loving environment and validate each other And then we also put on a good show.
Yeah,
you know,
those
are the best ones, and it's just so great. So I don't know that I have like a favorite, but this year I did get to direct one of my dream shows, which was Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. It's one of those shows that a lot of people think it's like silly and whatever, but I've watched it since I was a kid, and so I'd always wanted to direct it. And it was genuinely one of the most fun I've ever had while putting on a show, because the kids were just wonderful. They were so kind to each other. And like, if you've seen Joseph, we have a children's chorus, so little kids, all the way up to like Joseph and the narrator, who were our older kids. And they were 100% bonded and kind to each other. And, like, if you go back and look at the pictures, like, the leads are posing with the little kids and having the best time. And it just brought me so much joy to finally put that on stage and for them to have that much joy and connection to one another.
And I bet that's also great for, like, your dream, because you wanted to, like, direct it. And,
yes.
like, there's always something that goes interesting in a show. So I bet that was awesome, really having the feeling of, like, oh, yes, I get to, like, put everything where I want it and, like, have your dream come true.
Yes, absolutely. I loved that cast and I loved that show.
So I know you teach private lessons. What can students learn from one-on-one training that they can't learn in a group production?
So unpopular opinion to like a lot of kids your age is that you get out of private lessons what you put into them.
That's very true.
Meaning that you have to practice in between the lessons, or the lessons don't work. If I tell you something and you don't practice it, when you come back the next week, all we're going to do is go over that same thing again.
Yeah.
For me, I prefer to teach technique rather than like do vocal coaching of like audition songs and stuff like that. But my big goal is that my students leave me with enough skills that they can do at least some self-correction, and they don't need me anymore, where they know, oh, I know what I did there, and that's what it was. I need to drop my jaw, or whatever it might be. The hard thing about that in like our group settings is that if someone's vowel or their breast support or something like that's off, that's really hard to isolate when we're all singing together. And on top of that, I genuinely don't have the time to go through each song with each of the 40 kids in the cast and give them like private coaching. So if you really want to grow as a vocalist, your private lessons are so important, and you also should practice like half an hour to an hour every day.
Absolutely. Yes. So you said you taught like techniques more than others. So what would be like a core technique you believe that most people should know?
Man, it seems so small and like itty bitty, but it's really breathing. Like, a lot of people struggle with just really taking deep foundational breaths or planning their breaths. They'll sit here and they'll get, to the end of a line and they'll be like, and you're like, no, like you should have breathed like 5 measures ago. And the other thing is like really taking advantage of rests when you're singing. Yeah, just because you didn't need the breath in that moment, you should still top off and take that breath so you can get through the end of the next phrase. The other thing is we're from Texas, and we really like to spread our vowels, and we like to lean on our R's, and we like to say hard. And so really being conscious of that, even, for people like me, where I don't really consider myself to have a huge accent, when I say the word hard, you can hear that R because I'm from Texas. And so you really have to soften those things up.
Yeah, I definitely think breathing. Huge part. And I know, especially for people, there's JTF's coming up soon. And I know definitely for JTF, you have 15 minutes to perform around 5 or 4 songs. So it's all breathing. So you have to really focus on it. And I know a lot of people struggle with that. So
yeah, one thing that kids can do that will help is like when you have time to take a breath, really regulating your breathing through your nose. This is kind of gross and TMI, but if you're going to be a vocalist, you got to talk about mucus and like nose hairs and stuff. But like the purpose of your nose hairs is to filter out allergens and dust and things like that. So when you're singing, if you've ever sung and you've caught like a piece of dust in your throat, you know how that feels. So if you have time to really take that inhale through your nose and reset your whole mechanism, it'll release tension and things like that. So
interesting. Yeah, then I need to start breathing through my nose then. That'll help me a lot.
I mean, not necessarily while you're singing. It's just like if you have an interlude or something, re-regulating yourself. Yeah.
And now, finally, what advice would you give students who want to pursue theater as a career?
I think the biggest advice I can give is to know your worth. You're going to get a lot of no before you get a yes. And that doesn't mean you're not fabulous or you're not amazing. It just means not right now, or not this show, or not with this group. If you know your worth, You have a story to tell, because we all do. Someday someone is going to see that worth in you, and they're going to help you make it shine. But the other side of it is you've got to keep training.
Yes.
You've got to keep taking lessons and classes and keep upping your game. I've seen so many naturally talented people lose steam and quit because they didn't keep up their training, and other people who practiced more and trained harder than them end up surpassing them. So basically, you have to really know yourself, know your worth, and really practice hard.
Wow, I honestly believe practice is absolutely the most important, and also it makes you prepared, it makes you ready, so.
Absolutely.
I'm glad you said that. And now, Miss Kaitlyn, it is time for the 5 quick questions, where we ask every guest the same 5 quick questions. You must answer every question quickly and without explanation. Are you ready? What was the name of the first show you performed?
Chronicles of Narnia the Musical.
Wow.
I was a wolf guard. It happened.
What is your favorite show?
Right now, Little Women.
Yes. We're in Little Women right now, so.
I'm directing it in Dallas this summer.
Nice.
Yeah.
What is your favorite role you've performed?
Ooh, probably Garradino and Johnny Skiki.
What is your favorite dream role?
Barbara from Beetlejuice, but kids will want me to say Miss Honey, so I'll say that.
And what is your favorite candy?
I like savory, but if I had to pick a candy, I'll say a Hershey bar.
Oh, yes, I agree. Thank you so much, Miss Kaitlyn, for talking with us on the Ace Up Your Sleeve podcast. And until next time, I'm Reichen Young. Remember, you always have a winning hand with an ace up your sleeve. The Ace Up Your Sleeve podcast is brought to you by the students of the Acting Company for Excellence at North Texas Performing Arts. This podcast was created by Reichen Young, with sound design and editing by Latham Young. Faculty supervision is provided by Hannah Brewer. NTPA is a nonprofit organization dedicated to developing the character of youth through quality performing arts education and family entertainment. Learn more about upcoming programs and events at ntpa.org.